Okay, this is going to be a lot of information for August and September 1818. So I want to get started right away. There we go. Now, earlier I mentioned Andrew Jackson attacked Bull Lake's town or Old Town on the Suwannee River, and then he went over to Pensacola. Now, when he was there, he had captured British Marine Captain Ambrister. So he got together a military tribunal and held it for Ambrister and Alexander Arbuthnot. Arbuthnot was trading with the Indians. He was about 70 years old. Ambrister was a young man who had participated in the Battle of New Orleans and just kind of gets left behind when the British leave. So, of course, Jackson's well known for the trial he held, and the sentence of the trial was that one would be executed and one would be whipped and set free. And Jackson didn't like that, so he ordered the court to order execution for both. I think Arbuthnot was hanged and Ambrister was shot by a firing squad. And this created a lot of turmoil or a lot of criticism from the London newspapers, but really nothing was really done about. Britain figured that, they were just casualties in the unfortunate international incident. So, reading from the letters of August and September 1818, James Gadsden to John C. Calhoun says, after comparing the abstract of letters received at the War Department, Major General Jackson finds that some of the most important letters are missing. He is including reports of the operations of the 5th of May and correspondence of the governor of St. Mark's, the court against Arbuthnot and Ambrister, and papers captured aboard the schooner Chance, which is a ship that Arbuthnot had that was also captured. It says the mail never arrived in the War Department, and that's why there's a lot of correspondence and letters we don't have. Some of it's in the newspaper, some in the Andrew Jackson papers, the Secretary of War letters that I'm reading, and some in the captain's letters to the Secretary of Navy as well, because you have Captain McKeever participating in this campaign. So there are bits and pieces you have to go around and find. Major Daniel Hughes, U.S. factor at Fort Hawkins, now at Fort Mitchell, dated August 6, 1817, or I guess it should be 1818. I regret that the Governor Mitchell has thought proper not to pay me for the amount of the account, $2,250 due us. The orders are original, signed by the late Colonel Hawkins, paid out of the annuity which had lately been paid by the nation. The Indians have admitted them. The delay of payment is serious. So Mitchell is holding back the money due to the Indians. August 8th, 1818, Major General Gaines from Pensacola to John C. Calhoun, Secretary of War. The letter was faded and difficult to read. Gaines has inspected the defenses of the town, Santa Rosa Island, the bay, surrounding countryside and harbor. The blockhouses of town are constructed of wood and decaying and afford but partial defense against the small town. Of the old forts that remain, they offer no security by land or water. The forts guarding the entrance of the bay protect it for 2 miles with fire and hot shot. And he's describing the defenses of the bay, strengths, weaknesses, and how Jackson overcame the defense. The inhabitants of Pensacola appear satisfied with the change, nor have I heard any complaints. So, yeah, they're not complaining that we took over. The barracks are in state of decay and not habitable. The troops are uncomfortably quartered in the blockhouse. I'll set out a few days for Fort Hawkins. And when Jackson takes over as governor 3 years later, he'll find the quarters still in rot and disrepair, says they're filthy and uninhabitable. 31st of August, 1818, Lieutenant Colonel Arbuckle to General Gaines. Arbuckle's writing from Fort Gadsden. 188 hostile Indians from near the Suwannee have surrendered themselves near the post. Many are sick and in wretched condition. I've ordered them to the nation to report to the Indian agent, and they'll leave accompanied by military barge to Fort Gaines. About 300 total have surrendered. Lieutenant Leftwich will take command at Fort Gaines until I arrive. Many more will surrender and will remain quiet. The names of the Negroes who have been brought in by the Indians and the names of the Indians and the names of the known owners have been supplied. I shall detain the Negroes at this post until I'm further advised by the collector to ship them to Pensacola. Those belonging to the Indians have been conditionally purchased at $50 each. From the prospect of many more Indians surrendering, I've required that the contractor supply additional beef provisions, but he has failed. I've ordered Assistant Quartermaster Captain Spencer to purchase it. P.S. The Indians have delivered Negroes on the arrival at Fort Gaines. Expect to receive rewards promised them. It's questionable whether they gave them up willingly. Many of these might be free blacks or Black Seminoles who were never imprisoned. Some are identified as being escaped slaves from Pensacola. Some are escaped slaves from St. Augustine area. Anyway, more about that later. September 8th, 1818, Creek Chiefs at Fort Mitchell to General Gaines at Fort Hawkins. The chiefs say that it's their custom that since they went to war against the Seminoles and their warriors spilt blood, that the conquered enemies must surrender all the property and slaves over to them, that Colonel Arbuckle does not understand their custom, that they want to keep friendly relations, and please explain that to him. September 8th, 1818, General Gaines to John C. Calhoun, Secretary of War. Gaines writing from Fort Hawkins. I received word of the President's determination to restore St. Mark's in Pensacola with Fort Barrancas to the Spanish authority. I have directed Colonel William King to deliver Pensacola and Barrancas in due time St. Mark's. If the latter post shall be restored, there will be little doubt that the Indians will renew depredations upon the frontier. The Seminole Indians and the Red Sticks that remain among them are under more a spirit of hostility than a former period. It'll be interesting to note that Fort St. Mark's will be held by the Americans for 11 months until next year, February 1919. They'll give it back to the Spanish, but just as the Adams-Onis Treaty is signed, so it won't make any difference anyway. There are still Indians are still influenced by the British or Spanish agents in the vicinity of St. Augustine. Reports have come in of new talks to the Negroes and Indians from St. Augustine. I have a letter that confirms this. Part of the Miccosukes are disposed to peace. I ask that you disclose the name of the writer of the letter, that to no one but the President, if we surrender St. Mark's to Pensacola, we must at the same time prepare to surrender the principal advantages from the previous campaign and prepare for another expedition. I'm extremely unwilling to be again under the necessity of having anything to do with the drafted militia. And Gaines, at this point, really despises the militia. If the President should sanction movement against Indians, I request the regiments of Indians from the Northern Division and Captain Biddle's company of the artillery from Amelia Island. The United States is still occupying Amelia Island. Gaines, of course, he will later tell his plans that he wants to go down and attack the Indians near Tampa Bay. And he'll repeat the same thing again in 1836. Well, attack the Seminoles at the Cove of the Withlacoochee. Then he will write and say, now I want to go to take my army, go down to Charlotte Harbor and attack the Indians there, but that will never happen. September 8th, 1818, General Gaines to Calhoun from Fort Hawkins. Governor Bibb has received information that a party of hostile Indians is at the settlement at Sepulgus and Pine Barren, that's Alabama, and upwards of 100 are working in the woods. The settlers have left their home to Fort Dale and the blockhouse Sepulgus and Pine Barren. I've ordered a company of 50 volunteer rangers under Captain Boyles with a company of volunteers furnished by an officer and 25 regular troops from Fort Crawford to pursue, arrest, and destroy these Indians. And eventually they will have a skirmish with Captain Boyle and his ranger company from Alabama on the Choctawhatchee River in later October. And that will pretty much just make the newspapers. There's not a lot of letters information about that. The command of the detachment under Colonel Sam Dale, whose service has been well attested during the Creek War of 1813-14 and during the present year. The Indians are the same that refused to lay down arms in the Treaty of Fort Jackson and continue to be hostile. And this is about the only picture I have of Sam Dale. There's another picture on the web of I guess it looks like a wooden monument of him, well known in Alabama schools, taught how he almost single-handedly fought a canoe of about a dozen Indians and killed them all during the Creek War. That's taught in Alabama schools. And, you know, so people in Alabama are familiar with that. Quite a character, I imagine. The Indians have killed 30 persons within 60 miles of Fort Claiborne, 10 or 12 in the April and May of last year. The tract of country infested by this band of barbarians, outlawed by their own nation, is in part now offered for sale, a considerable portion being rich in many places covered with thick cane brakes, affords the skulking savage an impervious refuge. Of course, you can see the prejudice and bias of Gaines on this part. Those wishing to purchase must go in large parties to survey the most valuable land. It seemed probable that apprehensions of danger might be expected by land speculators when no danger really existed. So he's saying some of the danger is probably done by land speculators who want to raise the price to sell the land. In order to deter others from exploring the rich cane breaks previous to public sales, can fix the bidding. Under this circumstance, I deem it proper to accept the service of Colonel Dale's volunteers to arrest or destroy the Indians, or should they have fled, pursue them into Florida while Pensacola remains in our possession, lest they find asylum among the Catholic majesties of Spain. My quartermaster being without sufficient funds, if you'll send sufficient supplies, I shall visit Savannah the first week of next month, where I shall order supplies. The Creek Indian agent is smuggling slaves into the Creek agency last fall or winter, and I'll not have any business with him. So not only does Gaines despise the militia, he despised the Indian agent, and I think the feeling's mutual. Whenever troops are drawn to work on the road from the frontier posts, they'll be under command of an officer of the line, and not under the Indian agent. General Gaines writes to John C. Calhoun, September 16th, 1818. Gaines writes to the Secretary of War from Fort Hawkins. He says, Colonel Arbuckle reports that 300 hostile Indians have surrendered at Fort Gadsden at the end of last month. These Indians are part of the Red Stick Party and have not change things with the Seminoles near St. Augustine. Little Prince and the friendly chiefs of the Creek Nation have sent a letter to saying that they claim the property of the hostile Indians. I have not admitted their claim, which I hope will be approved for disposing of the property that is not claimed by any white citizen. So any Black Seminoles or people of color among that group that has been captured, even though they haven't been slaves previously, they're going to be sold as slaves. And General Gaines writes on September 16th to the Creek chiefs from Fort Hawkins, saying that Gaines has received from Major Hughes, agent of the Creek Factory, the letter relating to the surrender of our enemies, the Seminole Indians, to the commandant at Fort Gadsden. I agree that when our enemies are surrendered to your warriors, you have the power to dispose of prisoners and property belonging to them according to the laws of your nation. But you must understand that when your enemies surrender themselves to the United States warriors, our great father, the president, you'll determine according to the laws of civilized nations what shall be done with prisoners and property. The lives of prisoners who voluntarily surrender will be preserved. Property found in their possession belonging to our enemies, held by the commanding officer to whom it is delivered until the president or General Jackson gives orders for the final disposal. Property found in possession of our enemies belonging to white persons must be held to delivery to the property owners when duly proven. And so there's a list in there of 27 sundry Negros delivered at Fort Gadsden by the Indians. The name, age, descriptions given men, women, and children are those included. There's some from slaves from Kingsley Plantation, and also says who are slaves of Bull Eggs or Bull Eggs Town. Those would be Black Seminoles. And there's 27 names on there. You can see some of them here. I've actually reprinted the whole series of this letter on my blog, and I'll put in a description at the link below. It's very interesting. Most all these slaves are or Black people of color are children and juveniles. One of them was 10 years old, taken from her mother and sold in auction at St. Mark's. So, you know, despicable history, but I really hope that, you know, putting this information out here can prove interesting for people doing historical or genealogy research. I think it'd be great if somebody could actually trace their ancestor back to one of these people. It seems very interesting if they can do that. September 20th, 1818, General Gaines at Fort Hawkins writes to Secretary of War John C. Calhoun. He says that Wilson Limpkins is running the line between the United States and Florida from the head of the Apalachicola to the head of St. Mary's. So this is a surveyor running the survey line, what Andrew Ellicott never finished about 20 years earlier. And the surveyors requiring Gaines to furnish with him such military force as necessary for protection. The whole effective strength east of Alabama territory is 652 officers and men, sufficient to enable him to accomplish the boundary line before the rainy season. It cannot be detached with leaving several frontier posts destitute of the requisite guards. So Gaines says he doesn't have the men to spare. All he has is about 650 soldiers in the whole southeastern United States under his command. The prospect with peace with the Seminoles soon restored is not reliable enough to risk small detachments on the line which border on their principal haunts. The commissioner, however, will be furnished whatever he may request. Major Fanning at St. Mark's has orders to deliver that post only to an officer authorized to receive it, accompanied by friendly Spanish force not less than 250 men to garrison the post, to prevent immediate renewal of intercourse between the outlawed savages and a feeble garrison. It's true that the number of men required is greater than our present number of the folks. What Gaines is saying in Jackson, and this is something that was talked about in Congress, says, okay, we'll give you back St. Mark's to the Spanish if they guarantee the peace and tranquility of the fort by garrisoning it with 250 soldiers, which Gaines and Jackson are laughing about because they don't even have 250 soldiers there. And in fact, you probably can't find 250 Spanish soldiers between St. Augustine and Pensacola combined. September 20th, 1818. General Gaines from Fort Hawkins to John C. Calhoun's says he's received, after closing the last letter, that 6 citizens some days ago were murdered by Indians near St. Mary's, Georgia. Among them, Mr. Bullock, brother of the postmaster, is hoped that the president will order a regiment of infantry and a company or detachment of artillery from the Northern Division to Amelia Island with 300 recruits of the 4th and 7th Infantry. In a few days, I'll repair to Amelia Island to secure the frontier and pursue the savages. I should think it is my duty to require a regiment or two of militia for this service. Had I not been taught by painful experience that the good to be expected from a force of drafted militia falls far too short of the common calculations founded upon the numbers employed and bears too inconsiderable proportion to the waste and expense incurred to justify a requisition of such a force, whilst there is reason to calculate upon the assemblage of the requisite number of regular troops. A secret and rapid movement should be made upon the principal force of Indians on the river of St. John's, and thence to Chocochatty on the Bay of Tampa, to which place supplies may be ordered by water. I've already given orders for suitable vessel and provisions and ammunition to be held in readiness at Fort Gadsden. Their movements with disposable force will be ordered to the Bay of Tampa when troops arrive at Amelia Island. So Gaines is saying using the militia is worthless, but he wants to go on a campaign with some regulars, first down the St. John's, attack the Indians there, and then go around to the peninsula, up Tampa Bay, and attack the Indian town of Chocochatty, which is one of the few surviving large Seminole towns at this point, which he believes. September 20th, Major General Gaines from Fort Hawkins to Colonel William King, the contractor at Fort Gadsden, has been ordered without delay to supply the troops and friendly Indians without delay and there and at St. Mark's. If I have doubted his ability, you'll take a detachment of artillery soldiers in coastal vessels with provisions. The probability that a movement of the 7th Infantry in October makes it important that the provisions reach Fort Gadsden as soon as possible. Strong ships and good sailors should be selected for Fort Marks. If possible, you'll find the supplies have been complied with, send the provisions away. So if they're supplied, don't hold them there if it's more than what we need. Okay, so Gaines writes to John C. Calhoun from Fort Hawkins. Apparently, he's under the belief that the concern that the Spanish authorities in St. Augustine are aiding or encouraging the Seminoles and blacks, instructing Colonel King and Lieutenant Colonel Arbuckle. They express his doubt of the contracting agent to furnish supplies. That letter is dated September 23rd, 1818. It sounds like of course, what happened a year ago is repeating itself, but the campaign will not be authorized because the international incident with Britain and Spain. So Gaines will not get to go on his campaign here. And that's all the letters I have. I didn't go into the archives further than this. Of course, the United States will hold St. Mark's until February 1819. Fort Gadsden on the Apalachicola River will remain American outpost, kind of like their version of Guantanamo Bay 200 years ago. And it will remain there until Florida becomes United States territory in 1821. Then it will be abandoned. It's very important for the Americans to keep the Apalachicola River open. It's the main artery into Georgia, Alabama, that connects with the Chattahoochee and Flint River. A lot of the cotton coming down to go to market in New Orleans is coming down the river. So the Americans do not want another Prospect Bluff or foreign outpost to stop the economic activity of the Americans. And I think that's one of the main reasons for Jackson coming up into Florida, was to keep the Apalachicola River open. Jackson even had cotton interests up in Alabama or around Columbus, Georgia, I believe, too. So I hope you thought this interesting. This has been a very interesting time, and maybe next I'll start to get into some of the Indian Affairs letters from the early Florida Territory in 1820s when Florida becomes U.S. territory.